Hello again guys, this is the next screencast for acquisition of skill, and last week we talked about motor programs. This week we're going to be talking about loops and how they link with motor programs. Okay, once the motor program has been well learned, the performer may or may not have to think about the required skill action, so it could become subconscious, could also become conscious. So your executive motor program that we learnt last week forms the basis of what we call loop control, and this was designed by a guy called Adams, and it works on 3 different levels. This is the theory anyway. Open loop control, which is what we call level 1, closed loop control, which is what we call level 2, and a second level of closed loop control called level 3. Looking at open loop control 1, once you have your executive motor program, let's say a tennis serve for example, it gets stored in the long-term memory, so we know that from motor programs. So initially the subroutines get stored, and then eventually that whole program gets stored as you practice it further in the long-term memory. So all this idea of an EMP is stored in the long-term memory. Now when we want to use that program, for example, we need to use a skill in this open loop control. That motor program, the EMP, is created into a motor command, and that gets sent through the memory trace to what we call the movement effectors, which are your muscles. So essentially on the left in the red you have the EMP, the motor program, gets sent through a memory trace via a motor command to the muscles to perform the skill. And that's what we call open loop control level 1. And all this is done very, very quickly. Now open loop control, because it is just the motor program getting sent to the muscles effectively, it is really good for quick ballistic movements or very quick and rapid skills that you need to do, because it's literally grab the motor program, send it to the muscles, and therefore it is under subconscious control. It can be done rapidly. A good example of this is a reaction catch in cricket. So the ball is flying towards you, you don't have time to think, your brain has to grab that motor program, send it to the muscles, and you have to perform, you have to catch. Level 2, the closed loop control, takes a little bit longer for your brain to process. So again, we've got the EMP on the left stored in the long-term memory, and when we want to use that EMP, same process, it designs a motor command and it sends that information through a memory trace to your muscles to provide the skill. However, in closed loop control level 2 we get a tiny bit of feedback, and that feedback comes from our muscles, often through the sense of kinesthesis or proprioception. Okay, so how is that movement feeling? It's going to inform the brain and the long-term memory and the original EMP, and it's going to tell that brain and EMP to adjust if it's incorrect, or yes, that's great, it's working at the moment, my skill's working at the moment, that's fine, keep it the same. Good example of this is something like skiing. It's quite a quick sport. You've got to make very quick subconscious correction, so almost without thought you've got to think, oh okay, I've got to keep my balance, am I moving, am I not moving, I'm slightly adjusting each time. And so therefore that EMP going through the memory trace to the working muscles, coming back, tiny bit of feedback from my legs giving me kinesthesis, proprioception of how I'm balancing with my skis, and that loop is going continuously whilst I'm performing my ski run. And the final loop control takes longer still. It is what we call closed loop control level 3, and again it's the same process. So I've got my skill of a movement, an EMP, stored in long-term memory. Again, the brain designs a motor command and sends the command through a memory trace to the action of the working muscles so I can perform my skill. And with closed loop level 3 we get 2 forms of feedback. We get feedback from kinesthesis like we just did in level 2. So we're getting, what does this skill feel like at the moment? Am I doing it correctly? Got to feed that information back to the brain, back to the executive motor program. And the other feedback we get is what we call conscious feedback. So this sort of feedback we can see, so we can visually see what's happening. The skills perform quite slowly, so my eyes can give me feedback, my ears can give me feedback. I can also get feedback from a coach in the environment, maybe telling me something, so coming through my ears. So I'm getting lots of touch and kinesthesis feedback via my muscles, and I'm getting sight, hearing or sound through conscious feedback, and that gets sent back to the brain via a perceptual trace. So a motor command is sent through a memory trace to the muscles, but we get the conscious feedback back through a perceptual trace. A good example of something that will work with closed loop control is, say, an Indian dribble in hockey. So as the guy is dribbling, or if we want him to dribble, we've got the idea of dribbling as an EMP. It gets sent by a motor command and a memory trace to the working muscle, so I can do the dribble. As I'm dribbling, I'm getting feedback with my hands on the stick. How is that feeling? Okay, my legs on the ground. How is that feeling? That information gets sent back to the brain to remind the EMP that it's actually working, or adjust to something. And then also I'm getting conscious feedback, so I can see where the ball is in front of me. I can see where the other player is. I need to avoid him. There might be a coach, as there is in the background there, telling me you need to look up, this, that and the other, so my ears are working. And all that feedback goes back to the brain and then sends it back to the muscles again to keep the skill movement going and to adjust. Okay. As per usual, if you go over this screencast, we'll discuss all 3 loops within the lesson and bring any questions you have about the loops too.